Have you ever wondered how far you should actually hit each of your golf clubs? What are the averages per handicap, and are the longest hitters the lowest handicap golfers? And are you actually falling behind in the average distance you should be hitting with each club and losing out a huge disadvantage to your golfing peers? I'm going to reveal today what are the averages for each club in the bag per handicap sector, and why most average golfers are at a huge disadvantage to those lower handicaps. And I'm going to kick things off right in the middle of the bag, the 7-iron, the barometer that all of us use to gauge where we're at. Take a look at these numbers on screen now, see where your handicap sits. Are you anywhere near that average distance? And maybe just check out the difference between the high handicapper and the scratch golfer and see where you sit. How much are you falling behind? But trust me, 7-iron is not such an issue. There are, however, some big differences when we look at different clubs within the bag, and that's what you need to stay tuned for. That's not a bad strike, and pretty much on average in terms of distance carried per my handicap. I'm relatively happy with where I am at personally with that middle of the bag club, the 7-iron. I sit in a nice position, but the first thing I did notice was how surprised I was by perhaps how far we think we might hit the ball and how far we think the average carries are for a certain club, and they're actually a little bit shorter than you might have imagined. And that 7-iron for me is a typically good starting point to realise that. But what I will also be doing in today's video is acknowledging what those yardage differences are and how we can make a difference no matter what handicap position we see ourselves sat in. So not necessarily improving our carry distance, but improving our shot selection, club selection, and how we can make up that deficit on the better players. Next up on screen is driver distances by handicap, and it starts to get a little bit scary, because what you realise is just how much a high handicapper, or how far behind a high handicapper is to a scratch golfer. 50 yards he's got to make up on his second shot, and that can often be the difference between 5-iron or pitching wedge in the bag. That's a solid ball, probably on my average, but into this wind will go nothing like it. Now, it's also worth noting that I am not aware of the lofts on each of these clubs that you're seeing, in terms of the irons, that is, of course. And as we know, that can vary very much in the modern day golf club setup. So it would have helped if there was a loft situation going. Nice controlled wedge. But the bigger concern is the fact that the driver is not where the biggest issue lies in terms of the actual loss in yardage. It is at an end of the bag, which has always been a worry for me, a particular concern on this channel, and we pay a lot of attention to it. It is that long end of the bag, and it's where the big differences and the big gains or big losses, whichever way you sit in that handicap spectrum, appear. And it is really worrying numbers you're about to see. I also should make it clear that this data provided by ShotScope is merely averages. It doesn't mean a great deal. It's a little bit of a barometer thing to work at, and perhaps just answer a query in your mind. But my own personal opinion is the idea of chasing distance can often be very detrimental to golfers if they're not doing things properly and just ultimately try to swing faster and harder. It can have a negative impact on your game. I don't think you should be chasing distance, but it's interesting to be aware of it in today's video. But there are key areas where we need to focus because of our lack of distance and how we might make up those shots. So this is where the real problem lies. It's that long end of the bag. It's, would you believe, a 3 hybrid, 4-iron, 5-iron. That's where you see some real differences. And 3 wood is another one that I forgot. All clubs that I've suggested for long enough that are a real problem for average golfers, mid to high handicappers. And there's a real reason for that. Why don't we lose as much distance with driver as we do with these type of clubs? Well, it's quite simple, in my opinion. The sweet spot, the size of the club head, is huge on a driver. Because don't forget, your swing speed is going to be relative whichever club you're swinging. The problem is with a 4-iron, that sweet spot becomes very small. There's little room for error. Your ball speeds are going to drop off significantly, and that's where the problem lies. 3 hybrid, less so, But the similar sort of problem, not enough loft, is a problem when your swing speed is not that great. That smaller club head just isn't generating enough power for you. So you need to look at alternative clubs, is my key message when you see that data. And if you fall into those sort of categories, there are real options for you to cover that same distance with the same swing speed you've got, but by choosing a different golf club to put in the bag. And that's a message we've drummed home for the past 12 months and more. But if you do want to gain more distance, then you've only got realistically, I think, two options. That's get faster club head speed, because ultimately the harder you swing the club, or the faster rather you swing a golf club, the more club head speed you're going to generate. And in turn, and in theory, you should get more ball speed, which equals more distance. The second option is to be more efficient with your swing, which effectively means this smash factor number that you'll hear on many videos that we film reference from sort of a data-led video that we do. And what that effectively means is just you becoming more efficient and finding the centre of the club face more often. So that might be something down to technique, ultimately down to technique, and something you should pay great attention to. So again, fastest ball speeds are at the centre of the club face. The more you find it, the longer your club head or your club ball is going to travel. So for me, they're two concepts that you have to grasp, and if you want to hit the ball longer, they're the two things that you're going to have to pay some attention to. But I also mentioned alternatives, and the first one being, and that is of course getting more familiar with your short game, because it can make a huge difference to your scores. And ultimately what this is telling us is we're not going to hit greens in regulation. We're going to, in theory, the higher handicap we go, the longer we're playing into greens, the chances are we're going to miss that target. So being able to get up and down from this kind of area is one area that you need to focus on. Pay a lot of attention, practice hard, and give yourself a real chance of catching up with those scratch golfers in some way. Now this may be a video where you need to just stop, hit the pause button and have a little scan of that data that is in front of you, because everybody's interested in just how far they hit the ball. The key takeaway for me on a personal level is, well, a couple of things really. Surprised that the averages aren't higher. We don't hit the ball as far as we think we do. That was a real takeaway. The second bit was the fact that, yes, there is a clear difference between how far you hit the ball and what your handicap is. The longer hitters are, in fact, the better players. Kind of makes sense, but there's confirmation for you right there. The other key takeaway for me is numbers like the 3-wood, which I've been anti 3-wood for quite some time, as you well know. It's a difficult club to play. It's also one that has very little use in terms of versatility. And what you'll see there, even a 5 handicapper is 30 yards behind a scratch golfer when using a 3-wood. So for me, right throughout that whole spectrum, that 3-wood sticks out like a club that not many golfers should have in their bag, and confirms something I've thought for quite some time. The other point is this idea that even with this data in 2025, it's something that focuses on what I would call a traditional bag. That sets up being a sort of wedge, lob wedge, wherever it starts at, right the way through to driver, with a 3-wood, a 3 hybrid. And we're focusing on clubs that, or we're not focusing on clubs that really shouldn't matter, and that's lofted hybrids, lofted fairway woods. The likes of a 5-6 hybrid, a 5-7 and a 9-wood are all the types of clubs where you can choose, make up those gains or those losses by choosing the right club to help you compensate for your loss of speed and ultimately loss of distance. So I think that's the end of today's video. I think it was fairly short and sweet, but it's really interesting for me. I love that shot scope data. Always find it really interesting, and like I said, first time I've ever really seen anything like that and paid any attention to what the sort of averages look like, and a bit of an eye-opener in many ways. In some ways it doesn't make you feel too bad. You think you hit the ball reasonable, and in other ways you sort of worry, depending on where you sit, just how far behind we are from those scratch golfers and the kind of distances that we have to make up. And like I said, concentrating on those other areas are the only way that I can see that we can compensate in some way, because for my own personal game, I ain't going to be getting any quicker in terms of swing speed. I think I've got a relatively efficient swing. My smash factor numbers on TrackMan are always pretty decent, to be fair. So unfortunately, it's going to have to be that short game, get the putter working, and hopefully hang on in there and keep the handicap down for as many years as physically possible. Right, it is absolutely Baltic. I hope the wind hasn't played too much of a negative impact on today's video, because it's a relatively bright sky, but let me tell you, it's probably something like -2 or 3 with that wind chill factor thrown in. Everybody up here, those who are stupid enough to come out, are absolutely frozen. Right, that's the UK for you. Thank you for watching. I will see you all very soon. Hopefully it's a bit warmer.